Mario has seen quite the resurgence of fan-made horror content over the years. He was always around in the golden age of creepypastas in the early 2010s, but he always played second banana to the Blue Blur's horror hawk, to a fault. But since the original Mario image was solved by dutiful lost media hunters, the explosion of popularity for or Coronation Day, B3313 turning Mario 64 into a never-ending nightmare, the Mario 64 iceberg, the Wario apparition. Mario's horror game adaptations are far more varied and interesting than the infinite sea of .exe clones Sonic has to offer, for the most part. The Italian plumber has easily become king of fan-made horror adaptations of a children's property, but in the realm of actual written work, different story. I can name far more well-written Sonic creepypastas than Mario ones. Most written Mario creepypastas are pretty bad. Really bad, even. Half of them are just walkthroughs of ROM hacks with purple prose, and some of them are used as guidelines for what not to do when writing. Even the most famous one, I Hate You, is stunningly mediocre. There honestly aren't any Mario stories I can really recommend you read, except one. A 1, are you? Written in 2014, it wasn't exactly a sleeper hit when it came out, but 10 years after its publication online, people have begun to flock to it and recognize it as something that should be treated as the cult classic it is. A truly underappreciated gem that cuts to the heart of why creepypastas were, and largely still are, a colossal form of entertainment online. Now join me, brothers and sisters, because I will be explaining top to bottom, front to back, Mario's scariest creepypasta. Hey, my name is Peter, and I create videos on strange, obscure, and underrated games all the time, as well as various creepypasta content. So hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like these. Also consider supporting my Patreon, full of exclusive videos, early previews, and insights into the video making process with updates and discussions. Now let's talk about it. I won't be doing a full reading of the story because it's quite long, but I did make an entire narration of it on my second channel, which I upload weekly on. Did you guys know I have a second channel? I do a lot more creepypasta stuff there. I also won't be revealing the author right away, for a reason you'll see why. Our protagonist is unnamed, but let's call him Logan. Logan is a young man celebrating his birthday, but he's alone, since it's on the same day as his parents' anniversary. He's an only child and respects his parents' decision, but can't help but feel lonely. To quell his loneliness, he decides to replay his favorite game of all time, Mario and Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story, an excellent choice. He loved finally being able to play as Bowser, the grand story, and especially Fawful, the game's main villain. He loved everything about Fawful, his outrageous mannerisms, absurd manner of speech, and genuinely frightening plan to conquer the Mushroom Kingdom. And I totally relate to that. I loved Bowser's Inside Story as a kid. It's still a game I revisit fairly frequently. It helped spark my love for RPGs as a genre. Logan played from beginning all the way to the final encounter. Fawful had dug up an entity called the Dark Star, and siphoned its power into himself, as well as the Dark Star absorbing parts of Bowser's cells to create Dark Bowser. The final battle is between Bowser and Dark Bowser, the Mario Bros, and Fawful. Bowser has to punch Fawful out of Dark Bowser's stomach and suck him inside, where Mario and Luigi can finish him off. I remember replaying this fight countless time overs. The music has this raw sense of finality to it. The stakes have never felt this dire in a Mario game. Logan was also familiar, given that this was his favorite game of all time. He sucks in Dark Fawful and continues the fight. But a mistimed jump leaves Mario knocked out. With Luigi's turn, he prepares to give Mario a 1-up mushroom to revive him, but there's only one left, which is weird, because he distinctly remembers buying much more than that. Nevertheless, Luigi gives Mario the mushroom, and the fight resumes until... The game seems to have glitched in a way. The screen went white, totally silent. It was midnight, and Logan decided this glitch was a sign he should probably head to bed. He left his DSI and went to finish his remaining chores before bed, until he heard it. There was a scream. Logan was paralyzed, but he knew one thing. It came from his DSI. Slowly, he crept back into his bedroom, the darkness of his house sweeping in like winter's frost. Every step deliberate and calculated to get him back to his room as slowly as possible. Even without seeing the screen, he instinctually knew the cries of anguish were coming from Luigi. He made it back to his room. The screen was still stark white. Sounds of flesh being slashed and bones cracking erupted and rumbled through the DSI. Luigi's screams turned to whimpers until he was silent. Logan was a mess. He felt panicked, horrified, like he had witnessed someone close to him passing in front of his eyes. These were just video game characters. They weren't real. But these characters were so close to Logan's heart, it felt painful regardless. To cope, he decides to just go to sleep. He awakens the next morning. Things seem fine. He doesn't want to think about whatever happened to his game or his console. He just wants to try and enjoy the rest of his weekend alone. He heads to the bathroom for a shower, but when he looks in the mirror, he notices his eyes have changed color. Instead of their proper hazel green color, they've become gray, like Logan's gone colorblind. He took his shower, got dressed, and went outside for some fresh air. To his horror, the green grass outside went entirely gray, shuffling and dancing in the wind like a weather-vane ghost. In Logan's eyes, the color green had vanished completely from reality. His home was lonely, neighbors being far away, civilization even further. He decided to try and leave his life regularly, putting aside the strange new occurrences, trying to write it off as paranoia and sleep deprivation. He checked the mail and found an envelope addressed to him. To Ogun, missing the L in his name. To our very special boy. We thought this would cheer you up. Best wishes, Mom and Dad. Once again, missing all the L's. But even more concerning, Logan noticed that the handwriting was inconsistent with how his parents typically write. The pen strokes were bold and smeared, and combined with all the missing L's. Logan just hoped that they wrote that in a hurry. Inside the envelope they sent them was a silky Mario cap. It felt and looked authentic. It brought some comfort to Logan, who was still rattled by last night's experience. His confidence was rebuilt, and felt like he could tackle the final battle of his game once more. As he walked back inside his house, he couldn't help but feel like the Mario cap he had just put on felt oddly warm, like it was previously worn by someone just moments before. Various Mario games on his shelf all underwent drastic changes. Every image of Mario in his room was altered. He was missing his hat and crying. When Logan touched the cover of Mario Galaxy, it felt warm. It shifted in his hands, and his fingers became damp. It felt like touching the face of a living person's. And every image of Luigi had been blacked out. What was left of him was a blackened silhouette with a purple outline, like someone had plucked him out of existence and only left his outline. When Logan tried to touch his blackened form, it physically pained him to touch. Logan wept softly. He felt utterly lost, until he saw his DSI peacefully resting on his hope chest. He felt contempt, rage. All these frightening events started with Bowser's Inside Story. The game that was once the jewel of his childhood seemed to have turned against him. But he felt a desperate urge to still complete the game. Like if he was just able to beat the final boss, things would go back to normal. When he booted up the game, he was met with a very different title screen. Luigi's name was nowhere to be seen. There was no title screen animation. Certain letters in the title of Mario, Bowser's Inside Story, were highlighted to spell a 1. whatever that meant. There were typically only 2 save files, but a third seemed to have been created, missing the letter L, of course. He felt apprehensive to head right back to the final boss, so he chose the 3rd save slot. The game started immediately with Mario walking around Peach's castle. The castle was in ruins, crumbled beyond belief. His hat was missing in the story, and Luigi was nowhere to be seen, not even his colored overworld icon. With pale skin and a downcast expression, Mario was left alone to navigate the crumbled ruins of Princess Peach's castle. What had happened here? This was supposed to be the beginning of the game. What had caused the castle to fall into such destruction? And most importantly, where is Luigi? Mario can encounter some toads, but they've adopted these Fawful-like masks, like the enemies Fawful brainwashes later in the game, and they don't have any kind words for Mario. Did you enjoy that one-up mushroom? Not so super, are ya? Redcap defect. A 1, are you? Pay face is a guilty face. Once more, the letter L has been erased from the game's vocabulary. But more concerning are these toads' reactions. They seem to be aware of the fight from the previous save file, like they're in an alternate reality offshoot from the previous save file. They hold so much disdain for Mario, almost blaming him for being fed by the one-up mushroom by Luigi, strongly implying that Luigi is no longer with us. Mario is then cornered by these toads, who confiscate his hammer. This is a hero's hammer. It's about time you've returned it. Mario awakens in what appears to be Bowser's throne room. Logan, by this point, felt completely hollow. Everything was so far removed from what Bowser's inside story should be that it was baffling. Felt unreal, like a nightmare brought to life. What happened? Was there always some horrible secret route in the game that no one found out until now? Could something like this really be acceptable for a game intended for children? Logan's mind swirled and whirled with questions, his eyes glued to the screen. Time flew, and nighttime came again. But he's human, and eventually, he passed out from exhaustion. He awoke around 2:30 a.m. with his DSi's battery dead. He went to charge it, but it showed no sign of turning back on. With some relief, Logan simply left it, and tried to regain the last bit of his sleep on his weekend. But it didn't take long. He heard a scratching noise at his window, long, saline claws shrieking against the fragile glass. At wit's end, he armed himself with a steel baseball bat and tried to confront what was making all that noise outside, expecting someone to be there. But instead, there was something. Another hat. It was a faded gray-green, and there was no logo above the rim. A note was slipped inside the hat, ink as thick as blood. A 1, are you? The same message is featured in the game. Panicked, Logan sees a corner of the note has been folded. Unfurling it reveals another sentence. What a nice gift. Logan felt threatened, watched. Who had placed this hat by his window? What was their gift? Reaching inside the hat, he found a pistol, fully loaded, with safety off. It felt almost ridiculous. Who put a loaded weapon inside of a Luigi hat? Against his better judgment, he abandoned his bat and wielded the pistol, like finding a better weapon in a survival horror game. Logan remembered the Mario hat gift his parents had given him prior. He carefully approached the mailbox once more, shocked to see that there was something new inside of it. A you need is you, another note said. Logan felt rage boil inside of him.
I've read your notes. I played your game. I deserve an answer. Who are you?
He fell to his knees. It felt like his life was crumbling around him. The color green was gone. The letter L was gone. Alone and afraid, Logan knew his work was not done. This was only the beginning of the end. And Fawful. A you need is you. And Fawful. Reality and fiction have long since blended together, but this was Logan's real breaking point. How could Fawful, a video game character, possibly write to him? Surely this was the actions of a stalker or criminal. But how could they know such intimate details about what's been going on in his favorite game? Aspects and fragments of Logan's childhood have come back to haunt him, but things are only going to get worse from here. He knew something else was in that mailbox. He reached inside and pulled out a small, glinting piece of golden metal. A wedding ring, covered in blood. His mother's ring. Nothing seemed real to Logan anymore. Someone, or something, had taken all that was dear to him. The vicious implication that his parents are gone. The fragile, tender pieces of his childhood have come back to haunt him like a vengeful ghost. Logan heard a sound in the distance. He shot his gun hurriedly, but it hit no target. He heard the sound again. It was the sound that plays when Fawful speaks. It was coming from his bedroom, impossibly loud. The speakers of his DSi console simply weren't strong enough to output sound at that volume, but that meant nothing. With every passing second, reality seemed to crumble around Logan. He entered his home, his gun held with a foreign level of expertise. Logan needed a target, and his DSi was dead center in the bullseye. That was the plan anyways. When Logan got to his room, his DSi was nowhere to be found, which sent him flying into a rage that tore his entire room apart. He heard the sound once more, and realized that his DSi had somehow materialized into his right jean pocket. Without greater reason, Logan aimed his gun and fired directly at his pocket. The bullet passed straight through the console and tore through his leg. The pain was quelled with adrenaline. Running recklessly, his leg bleeding black. He took another shot, and again the bullet passed through. Finally, he ripped the console out of his pocket to shoot it point blank, but he noticed that the power was turned on. The screen was gray, and the console glowed black. Fawful came on screen, depicted so queerly that he hardly looked like himself. He looked several orders of magnitude more detailed than his traditional sprites. He was able to blink with a ghoulish commitment to realism, and he was properly green. No grayed out replacements. His proper lima bean green was all there, and in this context, it looked repugnant. He spoke, as if he waited for Logan to open up his DSi. Piteous pity. Fawful sees that you're lonely. Is that being so? Logan felt paralyzed, totally stun-locked by his former favorite character's oddly soothing words. This is what happens when you have the specialness. Fawful has it too. You make Fawful happy. Does Fawful make you happy? Yes. Logan mumbled yes. Despite all the torment this weekend has brought him, despite how Fawful was the mastermind and architect of his suffering, he was still his favorite character. He felt like he needed his approval, his companionship, perhaps even more. Logan put the console in his pocket and took a shot at his left palm. The hand split open, bled black, and the ashen tendrils began to wrap around his entire body, tickling him with a pitch-dark delight. Alone, are you? That is such badness. All you need is you, and Fawful. The DSi broke, right then and there, cracking and fragmenting into countless little black shards that all stuck themselves in Logan's skin, burrowing into his flesh closer and more intimately than anything earthly. Logan looked at himself in a mirror, smiling gleefully at his, no, their new appearance. Their eyes became red. The hands wrapped and changed into Fawful's gloves. Logan was no more. He had fully submitted to Fawful, merging with him to become Fawful. No barrier of truth or fiction mattered. All that mattered was the non-stop euphoria Logan felt. He took his newfound claw and shredded the Mario hat right off his head, even testing out his new profound strength by shooting himself in the head, only to find himself immune. Not even breaking his own neck sufficed. Logan had become immortal. Think the others would like our little story, Master? Of course. The tale ends, Logan and Fawful fully merged, posting the story online simply to please his new master. A 1 RU is considerably better than basically every other written Mario story by a wide margin. It taps into something deeply personal for the author. It feels intimate, private, revealing in the most demented way possible, like we're scraping the dust of someone's very soul that was expunged into a website page. Even if its strangest and weaker parts are all blazing with passion. This felt like transcripts of a diary entry mixed in with the classic tale of a haunted game. To summarize the story, Logan's life began to fall apart ever since he played Bowser's Inside Story. It bled into his real life, warping reality, until it eventually possessed him and took over his body, leaving his original self completely wiped, or forever stuck in some kind of mental prison, like a Nintendo-flavored Get Out. I've gone through the whole story, but there's still so much of the video left. I haven't even revealed who wrote the story. Surely I wouldn't make the mistake of not crediting someone, would I? Now, who wrote this? Fawful's Minion. Oh, that Fawful's Minion? The author being an established internet personality is certainly entertaining, but please understand when I say, we've only just begun this story. It might not look like it, but it's much, much deeper than you'd think. The human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. Unlike George Martin, Fawful's Minion, aka Logan Atkins, actually finished his story. If that name sounds familiar, it should. He was a fixture in the YouTube Countdown community. What, no one remembers the Countdown community? Fiery Joker? The Autarch of Flame? Rabid Luigi? You know the Autarch of Flame actually voices this guy in Pibby Show now? That's kinda crazy. It was an offshoot of the ancient commentary days. For people who remember old YouTube like I do, people would rant over something about still images, with only the richest of commentators favoring microphones over plain movie maker text. It was a whole genre. The Countdown community just listed things from 10 to 1 typically on a topic of their choosing, usually with an epic intro at the start. It's still around to this day, just not nearly breaking in the millions of views it used to. This is all to say that Fawful's Minion's been around for a while. 2010, I believe he started. And if the name wasn't enough of a dead giveaway, Fawful from Mario and Luigi is a very important character to him. It's more than just a name. Fawful is his entire brand, his cross his arms when upset avatar. Hell, he makes entire sprite animations for the mean green tyrant of the Mushroom Kingdom. Now that's some dedication I can respect. But what exactly inspired him to write this story? In May of 2014, Logan had a nightmare, but this wasn't a pedestrian nightmare. It was a 14-hour-long nightmare that left him feeling intense paranoia unlike anything he's ever felt. It wasn't just a frightening dream of being chased down by someone or getting your teeth pulled out. It was personal, intimately so. A few of my greatest fears are permanent isolation and going insane. One night, all of my fears latched themselves onto my memories and formed this terrifying story. The worst nightmare I've ever had. So much of his private fears manifested into a specter of torment, molding his favorite game, his character. So much of his life was flipped inside out to spook him. I'll let him speak for himself.
Hi there everyone, and welcome to my psyche. Yes, there's a door if you're too scared to stay. Because, well, we have something a teensy bit different. If you have a good memory, a certain event may ring a bell. Last year, at this exact time, I had the nightmare of my life. It wasn't just your ordinary jump scare. This actually terrified me. It was so bad, I didn't wake up for about 14 hours while having it. At least, that's what I recall. A few days ago, I began to get the same chill it left me with, which resulted in another nightmare. The exact same weekend. I'm hopeful it's a coincidence. The fear the original dream gave me inspired me to write down what I dreamt, as well as I could, and the result is this. My first, and I hope to be my only, creepypasta. To calm my nerves, I felt this to be necessary. What you're about to hear is exactly what I dreamt. Remember, this wasn't planned, so I ask that you share your thoughts, but know that there was no literary planning. So, I hope you enjoy my little story. A link to a written form is in the description, if you want to read along. Now, turn out those pesky lights.
What you're about to hear is exactly as I dreamt. A 1, are you, isn't so much formatted like a story, but rather a documentation of actual events that happened in his nightmare. I didn't really write it, per se, more like felt it. Every odd bit of the story, a ridiculously specific detail, everything really happened. I have no reason to suspect that Logan ever altered a bit of his story to fit a narrative structure. His nightmare just happened to align with it, for the most part. The story does say he's an only child, but he does have a sister in reality, so either in the dream he was an only child. We don't know much about his family details, and I don't exactly feel like asking him that, so I'll leave it alone for now. Logan's choice to publish and even narrate the story himself a year later in 2015 was an incredibly bold decision, and if we rewind back to the beginning of the story, you'll see why. The story starts with Logan, alone, on his birthday. His parents were out for their anniversary of their marriage, which left him feeling lonely. If this is true, Fawful's Minion chose to reveal a fragile, genuine piece of himself immediately in the story. It might seem small, but choosing to talk about how an aspect of your family life and how it makes you feel is a bold choice. It leaves you a little vulnerable. You're bringing a small piece of yourself to light, and this is what caused the story to finally find its fans, nearly 10 years after its publication. It's sincere. All these Mario brand products and games being warped into something threatening and ruined is another piece of Logan's life being turned against him. The franchise obviously means the world to him, and having it destroyed and perverted into something sinister is haunting in a soft, vulnerable place that everyone has. I don't care who you are, literally everyone walking on planet Earth has some story or property or brand or icon that we hold so close to our chests that remind us of our childhoods, our past, things that are formative to us as human beings. If I was like 18, 19 having a nightmare about Joey from Drawn to Life, I'd be a little bit disturbed, not gonna lie. Like, what if Goku tormented you? Okay, that example is kind of funny, but think about it. Goku is an icon, an inspiration, someone children grow up with and want to emulate. Dragon Ball is a story so close to people's hearts in the context of a nightmare, the most personal, isolating thing you can possibly have in this earthly lifetime. Turning against you, your deepest insecurities and fears manifesting as something you once loved. Night terrors are a real thing with serious lasting effects. Everyone's had a nightmare that left them feeling a certain way after it happened. We're just lucky it wasn't 14 hours long. There's a reason why most video game creepypastas are written about Mario or Sonic or Pokemon. These are all franchises with a huge density of children, teenagers, new adults. Many of these stories don't seem scary to people in retrospect or to adults, but to their authors, they feel very real and haunting because of course a child would be afraid of their favorite game franchise or character turning against them. It's no secret that most people interested in creepypastas are usually children or people looking to relive the glory days of when they were children. It's nostalgic. Creepypastas now have morphed into things like fake video game piracy screens, and Friday Night Funkin' mods, and Super Mario Logan, or whatever the hell he's called now. Even within Logan's dreams, there's an escalating level of dream logic happening here. When Logan first goes to sleep after his game froze, that's when the color green and the letter L vanish. It's when the gifts start coming in from Fawful. The second time is even worse. That's when the line between reality and fiction completely falls apart. Fawful becomes a living being able to possess and control Logan forever. Smaller details like the gun Logan finds in the septic tank in the bathroom are so out of left field that they're almost Lynchian in a way. So surreal, unexpected on the surface. Somehow, despite feeling foreign and alien, they also feel familiar. It's a deadly form of deja vu. Logan transcribed his fears of isolation and losing his sanity, depicted horrifically well within Logan's family being missing and eventually implied to be dead later on, but this also extends even to the Mario brothers. Luigi's vanishing is a crucial piece of the story, with the title alluding to this with its lack of L. When Fawful attacks Luigi, it's an attack so vicious and brutal that it essentially erases him from reality. The color green is gone. L's are gone, but the people haven't forgot. The Toads, seemingly conquered by Fawful, despise Mario for it, and Mario doesn't seem to defend himself either. He's a total shell of his former self. In a way, Logan is sort of projecting his fears of isolation onto Mario's longing to see his brother once more. Which is interesting because the narrator is an only child, but Logan is a brother in reality, so that fear is a real, genuine thing. If we suppose that Logan was sort of projecting onto Mario in that dream, then the details become much more troubling, because that would place him in the hot seat, that he might feel responsible for the destruction of his family unit, which was sort of foreshadowed in the very beginning of the story. Fawful merging with the narrator at the end does make me think about how Logan chooses to brand himself as Fawful's minion. There's clearly a connection and feelings involving identity revolving around Cackleta's former henchman about himself. I don't know the man personally, so I don't exactly want to armchair psychologist his exact feelings, but every cell in my body is screaming for me to at least mention it. Logan becomes maniacal and totally subservient to the evil Fawful in his nightmares, harming himself for pleasure, even giving an in-universe reason to post the story in the first place. Fawful quite literally controlling his actions and mind is a clear enough symbol for his fear of losing his sanity. The incredibly unique approach of A One Are You is that it was something born deeply from its creator's psyche. You simply cannot write a story exactly like this. You can feature the same twists, the same horror, characters, the exact same plot beats, but it's missing something crucial: soul. That's what the story has in spades: abundance, bountiful amounts of soul. Perhaps even beyond its original publication, there's a genuine, powerful connection I feel. It's Fawful's Minion's Pinkerton, if that makes sense, a very uncropped personal piece of work that's built on a foundation of heartstrings and uncompromising truth, and I'm hardly the only one who felt this way. Meet Zerty TV. All the corrupted gameplay you've been seeing of Bowser's Inside Story came from his channel. He's been a big fan of the story since 2016, and since 2019, he always wanted to create a playable ROM hack of the events described in the story, so he taught himself how to do it and released it on Halloween of this year. Zerty specifically cited the story as something that brought him comfort in troubling times, and it was something that helped him push to pursue his creative endeavors, something typically only reserved for massive stories like NES Godzilla or Ben Drowned. Zerty's video is a retake, meaning it's more of its own thing inspired by the original story with liberties taken, but it was such a good visual component I simply had to include it, despite having less than a fraction of its popularity. A One Are You spoke to people on a personal level. What it makes up for being far more obscure is its sincerity. It speaks to people on a level that most stories simply don't, because Logan wrote the story from a very special place. You can just tell when someone really puts their all into a piece of work, and this story screams it. You want to know why the story isn't popular though? It's because it was posted on DeviantArt, you know, the website for photos. If it was posted on an actual Creepypasta wiki, it probably would have gotten more popular. You can thank the Some Ordinary Gamer wiki repost they even found out the story existed, even if that page has a tendency to get vandalized. I have a lot of sleeping issues myself, so a nightmare like Logan's unfortunately isn't uncommon for me. Perhaps that's why it spoke to me so clearly. It was intensely relatable. The story wasn't really a big hit outside of Fawful's Minion's main circle, but this year, it really started to pick up. Mostly thanks to Zerty TV, partly because of that one Dream Team concept on Twitter, but I can feel it in the air. I can't exactly cite my sources, but I feel that the collected unconscious minds of men and women everywhere in the creepypasta community are going to decide to revisit the story a decade after the nightmare happened. Is the story perfect? No, absolutely not. Putting aside how the story was directly corroborated from Logan's dream, there are a lot of paragraphs dedicated to how the protagonist sobs and describing his day-to-day life, which aren't very interesting. There are plenty of points I believe could have been drastically shorted. There are definitely some mouthful sentences sprinkled throughout. I still think it's quite better than most other written Mario works, but it is exactly a classic? Not really. Temper your expectations, people. This is still a story about Super Mario. Don't go expecting Silent Hill. But regardless, hats off to everyone involved. I'll be leaving links to the story, to Zerty, and of course, to Fawful's Minion. Well done, Logan. Your work was tremendous and has enriched us all greatly. You would think the creepypasta community is dead, but far from it. While it isn't as popular, it's taken new life. People feel more comfortable being directly inspired by specific characters and stories. People have made livings off of creepypastas, and look no further than my own channel. A huge portion of my videos are directly related to creepypastas, so clearly people are still interested in internet ghost stories about Super Mario. I'm hopeful for the future of creepypastas. because it's looking bright. But that's been me. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope we see each other sooner than later. And until then, have a lovely rest of your day.